everybody, welcome to Comic-Con at Home 2020. I'm Jim Halterman, I'm with TV Guide Magazine and TV Insider, and you're here for the LGBTQ representation on TV panel, What's Next? We may all be here in a very different way this year than in San Diego, but we are here. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for this group of panelists that I have with me to do this deep dive conversation. So let's get things started. First up, she brought Mulan to life on Once Upon a Time. Welcome, Jamie Chung.
Hi.
Hi, Jamie.
Hey.
There you are. Hi. She's currently a part of the CW's Roswell, New Mexico, but you'll also remember her from Sense8, Jamie Clayton. Hey. And in the present, he's on the CBS All Access's Star Trek Discovery, and a few years back on My So-Called Life. Please welcome Wilson Cruz.
Hi.
Hey. And she's an Emmy winner for her amazing work playing so many clones on Orphan Black, and currently starring on HBO's Perry Mason, Tatiana Maslany.
Hi.
Hey, Tatiana.
Hi.
And where there's Wilson Cruz in Star Trek Discovery, there's a good chance you'll also find Mr. Anthony Rapp.
Woo. Hello.
Hi, Anthony. And you'll know him from shows like Angel and Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and recently on NBC's Council of Dads, J. August Richards. There he is. He brought to life Warlock Magnus Bane on Shadowhunters. Please welcome Harry Shum Jr. Hey, Harry. And last but not least, he plays a modern-day superhero as a firefighter on 911 Lone Star, Brian Michael Smith. Hey, everybody. This is a very fine-looking panel, I must say. And I can just hear all the Hall H screams if we were actually in San Diego. But thanks, everybody, for all your time. And thanks to the fans that are watching, because we're doing this for you. Comic-Con's always for the fans. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And today we're talking about the representation on television of LGBTQ characters and the stories we've seen played out. And all these people have had a hand in that, either in the past, the present, the future, I'm sure. I'm going to start with Wilson because, you know, you started breaking barriers a long time ago on My So-Called Life. I want to know how that role is over 25 years ago. How often do you hear about Ricky Vasquez, either in person or online? How often?
Every day. Every day. Even during a pandemic, somebody will write something about how they just discovered the show. I mean, here's the thing about My So-Called Life that's remarkable to me is that we have been off the air. We only had a season. We've been off the air for 26 years, and it's never actually been off the air. You know, it's been available in some form or another. So it has reached a couple of generations now. And what's exciting to me about where we are now is the fact that we have something like Love Victor at the moment, which takes Ricky and expands on that story in a lot of ways. You know, people ask me all the time, when was the first time I saw myself represented on television? And I always say it was when I saw myself on television. But the fact is now there exists a show that looks at a queer Puerto Rican boy and his family and how he navigates that. And it's incredibly moving, and it's fresh on my mind because I literally spent the whole night binging the entire series in a bucket of my own tears. So it's very exciting.
But at the time, Wilson, there weren't a lot of LGBTQ shows on the air. Will and Grace wasn't on yet. A lot of things hadn't come yet. We'd seen them shows. Did you realize this was something groundbreaking and revolutionary at the time, or were you just trying to do your job?
No. I was fully aware of how important that role was going to be for people, because I understood how important it was going to be for me. I understood how much I wanted and needed to see myself and my lived experience represented in some way, so that I could know that that I was going to be all right, that my life mattered, that stories like mine were worthy of being told, and you know, the fact that I got to be that for someone else, I say this all the time, will be the thing that I take to my grave with pride, that I got to let a generation or two know that they're valued, that their experience was seen and appreciated and understood, and that we want to see more of them. That's been the work of my entire career, whether it be on Star Trek Discovery or producing a series like Visible out on television. I've always had young LGBTQ people of color at the front of my mind, because we've been so invisible for so very long that I want to champion them every chance that I get.
Yeah, and I think the audiences are still craving that no matter what. I mean, no matter what the time is, we're all looking for those shows. I mean, I was so excited for Love Victor when it came on. It's a wonderful show. But
the thing about Love Victor, and I'll shut up about it, is that it's such a great balance of a Latino LGBTQ experience when you pair it with something like Pose, right? So that's one experience, but that's not the only experience of LGBT people of color. You can look at something like Love Victor, which takes place in a suburb, whereas Pose takes place in a big city. And those are different experiences and different ways of growing up. And so I love that we have that kind of diversity. We're starting to see that kind of diversity being told on, diversity of stories being told on television right now.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
And I think once social media really kicked in, one, you guys were all able to really connect with all those viewers, but I think even studio and networks could hear what the audience was saying. And Jamie Chung, I wanted to ask you, as soon as it was announced that, you know, you were going to be playing Mulan on Once Upon a Time, and once people realized there was going to be a queer element to that story, I feel like people went crazy in a good way. But can you talk about that experience from your end? Because I think that was around the time we were able to hear more from people directly.
Yeah, one of my favorite roles to play. And I know that Adam and Eddie, the creators, really wanted to include a character that represented LGBTQ. And so it kind of happened organically. You know, Mulan and Aurora's character, they went on this journey to find her prince, but really they developed a kind of relationship that couldn't be ignored. And it was really, really grateful that I was able to play that choice, because secretly everyone was really rooting for that, and it just felt right and real and fluid.
Did you feel a responsibility at all, knowing that this was a show that was was aimed at younger viewers too? It's definitely a younger skewing kind of show.
Yeah, but I especially because one of the characters is a known Disney character, and it was really important for us to share that story, because yeah, it really was. I'm glad that we got to do that.
It was great. It's fun. Tatiana, you were playing a lot of clones on Orphan Black, but of course, Cosima right away jumped off the screen, and I feel like in a different way that people really connected with, and there was such a great love story with she and Delphine. Can you talk about just how that felt being on the inside of that? Because one, you had a lot to juggle on that show, but also just knowing there was an audience out there that was really responding to that character and that part of the show.
Yeah, I think what was so striking to me and is the response after the fact, was the response after season 1, and being able to go to Comic-Con and connect to fans who were finally seeing themselves on screen in Cosima, and able to speak to their parents about who they are, because Cosima allowed them to have, an example or a storytelling kind of, a way of telling a story that they could then go, hey, that's me. There's something about that was really eye-opening to me, because I've, always moved through the world with a lot of privilege, as, and to be able to see that impact was just so incredible. And our show was about identity and about the myriad ways that we express ourselves, the myriad ways that we are human. And, to have sexuality as a key part of that exploration was a no-brainer. And we really went back season 2 and felt this immense pride and this immense responsibility and this immense protectiveness over the LGBTQ community and our clone club, who were majority LGBTQ. So it's completely changed my life, that connection to the community and to the Clone Club.
Because I feel like once you have those fans, like they stick with you because they don't forget that you've done that for them, that you played that role. So even you're playing some on Perry Mason now, the character is very different. Guessing your
character is very different.
My character's what? Thanks, Milton. Wait, what was the end of the you froze?
Oh, okay, sorry.
We lost you.
So, but my point is that like you're still hearing from those people, even though Orphan Black's been off for a couple of years. You've done a lot of different things since then. You're still in the Clone Club, and they're still following you.
Well, we did like a charity event, charity live read to raise money for LGBTQ centers and a homeless center in Toronto as well during COVID, because we knew LGBTQ people were disproportionately affected by COVID. And seeing the Clone Club come out in these huge numbers and donate money and like still have this community that shares, you know, they share their fan art with each other. They have like relationships. Some of them are dating. Like it's just this beautiful, you know, international community that's still so alive. Yeah.
That's great. Jamie Clayton, who I'll slide in real quick. You along with Brian are both in this fantastic documentary on Netflix, Disclosure. I watched it this past weekend. If you haven't watched it, anybody watching this, go watch it. It's wonderful, and really, I learned a lot, and I've been covering this part of the world for a long time. But congratulations on that, first of all. But you know, I first talked to you during Sense8, and that was another show that really kind of felt revolutionary at the time. And I'm curious, on your side, did it feel revolutionary to you and what you were doing with Nomi?
Yes, in the sense that I'm a woman of trans experience, and I was playing a woman of trans experience written by a woman of trans experience, and also being directed by her and her sibling, who at the time wasn't out yet, but who is now also a woman of trans experience. I mean, so it was like, you know, the most beautiful layered cake of, you know, all these amazing flavors. And while I was doing it, I don't know that I necessarily knew. I think as an actor, you know, it's like I book a job. It's like I do the audition, I book a job, and I hope that people like it and they like me. And it's just like, like, is anybody even gonna watch this? And then people liked it. And yeah, like there's like sensies like all over the world. And I still get messages like this afternoon, you know, because of the quarantine stay-at-home orders, people are rewatching it and watching it for the first time. And yeah, I don't know that I knew how big it was going to be. I think that maybe I was in a little bit of denial about it, but I couldn't be more thrilled that it is what it is and that it lives. And like Wilson was saying about My So-Called, it's like it's there and people, it's on Netflix, and so people can keep discovering it like for forever. It wasn't on like Thursdays at 9, and now it's gone.
Yeah,
it's for forever.
Well, I know in writing about this show, I had to even check myself in how I was writing about trans issues and the language, just making sure I had everything correct, and I appreciate because you were always really helpful with that. Did you think about that for viewers, that they were going to be educated on things that maybe they hadn't seen before, especially sci-fi viewers, which now you're seeing much more of this representation, but a lot of sci-fi didn't really have a lot. That's changed a lot now, but did you feel that at all when you were doing Sense8?
I was hoping that people wouldn't be like turned off, you know, by the show just because, you know, like I was on it and my character was trans and a lesbian and had a girlfriend who was a woman of color. It was like, it was like, I was hoping that wouldn't turn people off to it. And I don't think that it did. I mean, I hope not. I know that sci-fi can, I mean, I don't know. The world is a largely conservative kind of place. And, you know, like fashion can be conservative in the music industry and whatever. And Hollywood is too. And I know that the W's and JMS got a huge opportunity to do something with this show and with these characters. And I was hoping, you know, that people would watch and learn, you know, like the difference between gender identity and sexuality and just simple things that so many people still don't understand. I hope that they learn some stuff.
Yeah, I just realized a lot of the shows that all of you were a part of were sci-fi or fantasy. Is there something to that in a bigger scale? I'll throw it out to whoever wants to talk to it. Just the fact that it is, I don't even know what the question is there, but the fact that it does seem to be a bigger part of sci-fi now, and audiences grab onto it. Is there something there as far as sci-fi and fantasy of it all?
I mean, as a born nerd, I can safely say there's a large part of the nerd community that is queer, and that has sort of been hungering for this representation. So I think it's always been, you know, and there's been a lot of sort of coding, what's known as coding, when they, you know, think that there might be indications of it, even though it's not explicit. And then there's, you know, Star Trek was the first example of what they call slash, where they would write fan fiction where they would pair up Kirk and Spock in romantic relationships. So it's been part of the geek fandom. The queer experience has been part of the geek fandom forever. So I think it is a natural Venn diagram. I do think, however, there's also a pretty big part of the geek fandom that can be pretty, like, you know, conservative, hetero, like superhero kind of militaristic thing that can be part of it too.
Yeah.
You know.
But anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I mean, I think the fact that you have to suspend disbelief already when you're dealing with sci-fi and fantasy, right? So the leaps that you have to make aren't as big. And I think you allow yourself to go places you wouldn't ordinarily allow yourself to go, and consider ideas and concepts and other lives, you know? So it's interesting. It's a great playground for, I think, creative content creators.
Okay. Going back to trans issues, Brian, I was rewatching the 911 Lone Star pilot because I wanted to see exactly how they introduced you and how the transness of your character came out. And it's right away, and your character's off to the races, and it's not a big reveal in a way. It's just a part of who he is. But about that, because I'm wondering if there were conversations about that or if it was already in the script. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was already in the script, and when I first had looked at it, I was going to be concerned because I'm like, why are we just coming out the gate with this guy? But what was great was that he shows up kicking ass. So before he even talks about who he is, he just comes in. You know, he recognizes that there's a threat. He, you know, kicks this guy's ass, and now he's in this job interview. So I like that it was part of the job interview montage. So it wasn't just this singular moment for the trans character to talk about being trans. It was everyone was being interviewed about the special aspects that they are going to bring to the team. And something that I did appreciate about it was that it allowed my character to sort of look at something that had been problematic where he was at back in Chicago, and it was like a detriment, and he had started to sort of buy into, you know, feeling that his transness was a detriment. And here in Austin's new place, you know, in this interview, it was rephrased to him as an asset. And that was like, for someone who had been in such protective space for such a long time, to have an outsider recognize this and kind of bring that to his awareness, you know, I thought that was brilliant. And it was a way to, like, kind of, you know, open up my character a little bit more, and a great way to bring the audience into a character like this, you know?
And also it being set in Texas, I think says a lot, that because he can have this life there, and it comes up in the show. Talk about how it comes up in the show throughout that first season, because there's an episode where you see him, you know, meeting a girl and going on a date, but talk about that, because even that was very revelatory.
He knew, I mean, like, you know, I kind of played the character as if, you know, it was my own experience, what I would be doing in this character's shoes. And it's like, you know, he's going to Texas, and, you know, he doesn't know what to expect. Austin is a progressive city. He's aware of that. But, I mean, you're going to have people who are, like, you know, shaped by their larger environment all over the place. So, you know, he was hesitant to do it. But, you know, as Captain pointed out, there's somebody down here who needs to see someone like you. And that spoke very much to my own, like, personal mission. So I could understand why this character would want to do that. And what was great about the way the rest of the show unraveled was that, you know, they were really responsive. The people in the writer's room, it was a writer's room that didn't have any trans people in it, but they were willing to listen to me and let me take the lead when we were kind of delving into that storyline, which is something I deeply appreciated. So one thing I said, I thought it was important to, like, we don't have to bring this up every time. Let the audience forget and only talk about it unless we need to talk about it. Because, again, they can just walk in my shoes. So when it comes up, then the audience has to deal with it almost in the same way that I have to deal with it, where it doesn't really come up until it comes up. And I thought that was brilliant in how we navigated the dating episode. And, you know, so it wasn't any, like, again, like, I'm just fighting fires. I'm trying to get used to this new environment. I'm a Black man in a new space. I'm just dealing with that. And if the transness comes up, I'm using it to connect with people, as opposed to, you know, outsiders, you know, using it and either attacking me with it or me having to be in a place of defense. It was very much rooted in my character's point of view. And I thought that was very progressive. And I think it allowed the audience to walk my character's shoes a lot more. Like, what I liked about the dating episode specifically was, he explained what his fears were, you know, because he was connecting with the other guys in the group, not because I'm trans and, you know, oh no. It was like, we're all talking about our problems. And he felt like he could open up because they also had their own issues. So it was more of like connecting in a brotherhood and fraternal kind of way, which was great. And he goes on the date and, you know, they allowed me to change the language too, and, you know, how he was going to talk about, you know, his experience with his date. And it wasn't, I think at first it's like, there's something I haven't told you, or there's something, you know, and I was just like, no. And they let me change the word into the way that I would say it, where it's like, hey, there's something we haven't talked about yet, you know. And just that small tweak took away that whole like secretiveness and reveal and all of that sort of baggage that came with prior representations of trans people. And it's just like, hey, this is part of my life. This is something I want to talk about. I want to get comfortable with you first before I have that. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I have no shame about it. And that was a great way to leave it. And then what was even more brilliant was that they didn't show the conversation. So the audience had to go to the commercial break thinking, what did he say? How do you describe that? How do you talk about that? Like, exactly. I want you to think about how difficult that is, you know, before you just assume that people need to disclose to you, you know, and that we just owe you that. I want you to think about how challenging it might be, because you never know how that person is going to deal with that information, and if you're going to be safe or not, if you're going to be hurt or not, you know? So I love that we left that to the audience to sort of take that journey with them.
Well,
Can I just say how amazing that is, and what a great example of what happens when you hire someone who has lived that experience and can bring that knowledge to a writer's room in a way that is helpful to them. This is why we ask for trans people to be able to play the trans parts that are written.
Yes.
Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Also have writers.
It makes a difference.
Yeah, and also having writers who have experience. We have a trans character on our show, and we have a trans writer as well.
Yeah.
So there's some.
Yeah.
Doing the work, Brian. Doing the work.
That's right. Listen, and then like, you know, it's interesting, you know, because you have to be willing to go above and beyond. You know, like, I'm ready to do my work as an actor, but I'm also like, I'm here as an advocate. And I'm okay with educating, you know what I mean? Some people don't want to do that, and like, that's fine. I understand. Some people want to go to work, and that is fine, and you deserve that opportunity. That's why I like the idea of having more representation in shows, so you don't have to put that responsibility on just the one character. You know what I mean?
And this is the thing that nobody talks about, is that when you are a first, which is, you know, when you're one of the firsts, and in an industry that isn't used to having to have these conversations and don't even know what they don't know.
Exactly.
It's part of our job to be brave enough to have the conversation, to be vulnerable enough and authentic enough to say, hey, I have something to add to this conversation that is valuable to the storytelling. And it's great when actors take ownership of that power.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're doing work for trans actors who are coming after you.
Yep.
And that's what I have to keep in the front of my mind, like, all the time. You know, it's like, I'm excited about the opportunity that I have right now, but what can I do for the people that are coming behind me that I am hoping to bring with me, that I'm trying to hold this door open. If that takes me sitting down at lunch and having a long conversation and doing a lot of education, okay, give me the general style, let's do this, I'm ready, you know, and I'm willing to do it. You know? And it makes so much of a difference when people are willing to listen, and when they're aware of the mission of the show. That's something I definitely appreciate about the show here and on the L Word, where it's like, we know that we're doing something that's going to have an impact on audiences. And for a show like that comes on Fox, where it's coming into the homes in the middle of America with a lot of people who do not know that they may even know trans people. They think that they don't know any trans people. The writing team and the show itself are like, we know that we are going to be trying to educate. We have a mission here to sort of make lives better for other people. So I'm like, I'm all aboard. Let's do it. You know,
Preach.
show, how can we talk about things in a way that's going to have the most impact. You know what I mean? Because it's really hard to legislate against somebody that you can relate to. It's really hard to sign that anti-trans legislation when you spend Thursday after Thursday with someone and you know what it's like to walk in their shoes.
Yeah. Harry, when you were on Shadowhunters, your character was a bisexual. How old was he?
No one knows yet. Around 400 years old, somewhere.
Okay. Bisexual warlock. But what were your discussions like with? I mean, your show came from source material. There'd been other things they were leaning into, but did you have some of those conversations with how his sexuality would be represented and what kind of relationships we'd see him have? Did that come up at all?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to say like how wonderful this panel is and how incredibly informative and also such a great conversation, I think, for not just audiences, but even for me to hear, you know, I think from the courage that it takes to be able to say like, you know what, no, this is my truth, and be able to go to the people that are in a higher above you, to be able to say like, you know, let's make this right and let's do this right. And I think going and segueing into your question is, those conversations are definitely had, because I think coming from source material, obviously everyone knows when you adapt something, you kind of have a little bit, you're gonna adapt it for TV, and it's gonna change a little bit. And I think what was important for a lot of people is the relationship for my character Magnus and Alec, and making sure that that is not watered down, that is not taken to a place where it's like just TV friendly, and it's something that we can really go there and be able to have conversations about sexuality, and also how it's being taken in this shadow world, which in the end of the day, it's still very conservative and kind of represents in our world today now. But I think for me, what was most important is, outside of just getting the character right and doing my job as an actor, is making sure those stereotypes that are had towards specifically bisexual characters, and sometimes even like being just like promiscuous, and then like not being able to have just a good relationship, and to not have to have all that drama of the makings of television. I think that was something important for us to talk about. Even what I commend, like Todd and Darren, there's a scene where, you know, it was a past love of a girlfriend that he had, and you know, there was an opportunity for him to possibly like cheat on Alec, and it was this moment where he said that, you know, I fall in love with the soul, you know, and not with the specific gender, and little things like that I think written in dialogue. I think it's incredibly important to plant seeds into audiences to really think further outside of just, you know, what they've been told in I guess past TV shows that haven't really gone deeper, have a deeper dive into sexuality, or seeing, I guess, even a couple being domesticated, you know, on television in a weird sci-fi fantasy world that, you know, some people don't get to see much. But we definitely had those conversations, and I was very fortunate to be able to learn a lot as well in the process. And
I think your fans did too, and they responded.
They responded really positively.
I'm sorry.
Hanging on those words.
I hope I'm back now. Am I back now?
Yeah.
You are.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Thank you.
he's filling in the blanks for you. Anyway.
I like it. He's got my back. I love that the moderator's the only one who's having a problem here. Jay, let me talk to you, because Council Dads is on right now. You're playing a gay character, and you made a very public proclamation around the time the show was coming out. And I want to quote what you said to your co-star, Sarah Wayne Callies. You said, "I knew that I could not portray this man honestly without letting you all know that I'm a gay man myself," which was very personal and wonderful. But I want to know, like, talk about that experience. And it came because of the role, right? Like, this is something you could have done in the past, but because of this role, you took that step, right?
Yes, the "you" in that quote is referring to the writers, the producers, and the other actors for a few reasons. Some of which is what Brian was just talking about. Like, I felt like I wanted to, if I was going to play this role and I aspired to do a certain level of work, that I was going to have to bring all of my experiences to the table and be able to talk very specifically about the intersection of being a Black man and a gay man in the world and in the South, which is where the show takes place. So I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do the level of work that I wanted to do without being able to contribute from a place of authority, saying, this is me, this is my life. Now, up until that point, I had never done that with the people that I'd worked with before, really because, you know, I was having such difficulties navigating the business as a Black actor. So, you know, to add another thing to the equation just felt like it would have been an impossible situation. But now at 46, being in these circumstances and knowing what is important to me, which even beyond wanting to do a certain level of work, I want to fight oppression with my work. And with my work, I feel like I'm having this conversation from my first job, which was on The Cosby Show, to Angel, to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., to lawyer shows. I feel like my work is this conversation about Black male humanity. And it felt like this was a natural evolution to that conversation. So I felt like the universe was asking me to walk into a new place, and I had to take it up on its offer.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
Well, thank you for doing it.
Congratulations!
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you, Boo Boo.
I love you, Wilson. Thank you. You've been a part of this journey with me. A private counselor and just a wonderful friend and somebody that I can lean on and talk to and rely on. So I appreciate
all of you can.
So you take clients?
I love you. I'm so proud of you, Jay. I'm so proud of you.
I love it.
I'm proud of you, Wilson, honestly, too. Watching Visible out on television prior to coming out publicly just really, really solidified for me the importance. I texted you the whole time I was watching it.
You did.
That's great.
It was so beautifully laid out, and I realized that I was being asked to be a part of this progression, and I couldn't say no.
Well, we talked a lot about the dialogue that needs to go into these stories and what people talk about. I think visuals are just as important. And Anthony, I want to ask you about when there's a wonderful scene that I've brought up before with you guys, when your character and Wilson's character are brushing their teeth. And it's such a beautiful, simple scene, but it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. Because I don't even think you were even talking about your relationship, but can you talk about that scene and what you're doing, what it meant to both of you?
Well, Wilson and I have been actors and activists for decades now. We're getting old, but so we were very, very aware of the moment and very aware of how meaningful it could be. We were hopeful it would be meaningful, but you never know for sure if it's going to really land. But we just showed up that day. We were really excited to get to do that, and part of what I think that was it Brian who talked about, no, it was Harry who talked about like domestic life on a sci-fi fantasy show. Yeah, the idea of having something really domestic and intimate and quiet, and and the scene is like, we're brushing our teeth, but we're also really caring for each other. And it's the first time you reveal that we're in a relationship. You've seen our characters talk to each other, but you didn't know necessarily we were in a relationship. It just was an elegant way to do it, and it was a meaningful way to do it. We knew that there was going to be a kiss, or we thought there was going to be a kiss later in the season. So it wasn't about like sexual connection, which is also sexual romantic connection. It was about domestic connection,
intimacy,
and then and intimacy, and it really it landed far more powerfully than I think either of us realized or would have anticipated. And it continues to be that powerful.
My favorite part of that day was just the moment we took for ourselves before we started shooting, where we were just like, this is to steal the future president's sentence. This is a big deal. But what was really amazing for me also is to piggyback on what Brian was saying, was that we got to meet these people in their occupations first, that we got to value them as part of this team. And then we found out that they were together. And that was the message that, first and foremost, they're heroes who are helping, as part of this team to save the world. Oh, and by the way, they are in love and they've been together forever, and, deal with that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, part of this panel is talking about what's next, because we know where we've come from. We know what's happening now as far as these pretty much we're talking about scripted television here, but what is next? Where else do we need to go? Because we're seeing these characters, these stories, then we look out the window and that's not always what we're seeing and what we're seeing on the news. Does anybody have any opinions on that? Like, what do we need to see on television that we're not seeing already? Or is it more just keep putting it out there? Anybody?
I mean, non-binary stories, more of that. That's certainly a big threshold to keep broadening the, and like Wilson talked about, like, you know, we've especially I think a lot of queer stories of people of color are more urban generally. So yeah, I think it's good to have a little more depth and breadth of experience too reflected, perhaps. Certainly, I think queer people of color anyway, like, need to be a lot more on TV, you know.
Yeah, I said,
and then like what Brian was saying too, that it's not just about oppression. It's not simply about struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, did you ever watch the movie The Celluloid Closet that Vito Russo did? It was about all of the tropes, you know, for so long about the queer experience were about, you know, despair and tragedy and death and, you know, shame and the closet. And that's certainly part of some people's experience, but there's so much more to tell than that.
Right.
And I think that's what's exciting is that, I'm sorry, Brian, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to just to piggyback on that, you know, more intersectionality, period. Like, I'm loving that I'm seeing more representation of trans people, but it's like there are trans disabled people that I want to see, of trans people who are of immigrant backgrounds, you know, just the more diversity, like, in the actual humanity and the tapestry of humanity. I just want to see more of that. You know, there are Asian trans men. I like that we have that in, you know, the L word, but that's like the first time we've really seen that, you know, centered. And what does that bring about that experience? So definitely continuing to see this intersectionality of the LGBTQ representation, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to piggyback on what both of these men are saying is that, you know, just a spectrum, a wider spectrum of the LGBTQ queer experience. And I mean, you know, a spectrum of economic levels, of queer joy. You know, the fact that queer POC joy right now is a revolutionary act. Yes. You know, our joy in a moment like this, during this time, under this administration, your joy, the way you are living your life in order to welcome in other people is a revolutionary act. And so I want to see more of that. I want to see more of our joy. I want to see more people of color who are queer in joyful situations. I'm happy to report we'll be seeing more of that on Star Trek Discovery.
I didn't like to piggyback on that. I know I'm talking a lot, but I mean, just more of these aspirational stories as well, you know, like the joy and then things that go beyond the character story studies and the relationships. Like, I do want to see more queer representation in fantasy. I want to see more queer representation in action movies and not just the sidekick or whatever. I want them to be like lead, you know what I mean? Like, I would love to see that, you know.
And you know, go Jay.
I just need to flag urban a bit. I need to flag that. So, you know, just because that is the reality of a lot of our experiences. And so I just need to flag that. Yeah, that's all.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it is our experience, but it's not the only experience. And I think what Anthony,
right, but because something is urban, it doesn't need to define anything about the person or their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think there's room for a diversity in where we live, right? Because we don't only live in urban areas. And it was, you know, for instance, Love Victor, for instance, takes place in the South, in Atlanta, right? And he lives in a suburb of that. So it was interesting to see that, you know, that he could exist in that and that he was, that the urban experience was foreign to him. So when he goes to an urban area, he's like, oh, this is a whole new world for me. But the last thing I was gonna say about what we need to see is, in order for us to see all of this new diversity and this wide spectrum of LGBT experience, we have to have more LGBTQ, especially trans people, behind the camera. Producers, directors, writers, because that's how we're gonna see more diversity.
Yeah.
I feel like that also extends to the way that things are filmed, and the gaze and the perspective and the way cameras are used. There's so much stuff happening in my room, but like I'm so interested. This is so loud. I'm so interested in like different actual physical points of view that the camera can take to be inside of an experience as opposed to objectifying it. And I don't even know what that looks like, but I'm so curious about what different perspectives behind the camera will enable in terms of the visuals and the point of view that we get to experience, like you're saying, the empathy that we feel for a character because of how we're looking and feeling them.
Well, let's invent that.
Pose really is like a great example of that, because you have Janet Mock as director. I think one of the most popular episodes was the one that she directed, and it was because she was behind that.
Who needs to
I didn't do it.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, and it was something that I enjoyed about my experience going into the L Word as well. When I walked into my camera to my second audition, the showrunner's assistant was a trans man, and I'm like, oh, okay. So a lot of the reservations and fears that I've had, kind of based on the first time that they tried to broach trans masculinity on that show, was kind of like put to rest. It's like, you are really taking this serious, and you're not going to put it all on the shoulders of the performers. You're working on this, in the entire writer's room. I love that in the room you have trans people in the room. Like Thomas Faith McBee contributed to the story writing and the script there. So I absolutely agree with you, Tatiana. That is exactly how we start to shift the gaze, and it hits us differently for sure when the Helmers are of that experience.
That's the answer, right? Because it really shouldn't be the responsibility of the actors all the time to write it for them, or to, it shouldn't fall. The actor should be able to just come and interpret the material as,
that part.
So that is the next. That's the next.
Okay, Jamie, Clayton, were you going to say something? We're almost out of time, so go ahead.
I want to just two quick things. So for me, it's like within my career, it's always been my goal to be given the same opportunities that any cisgender an actor who identifies as cisgender is given. I want to be able to audition for roles, for all kinds of roles. For so long, actors who identify as trans, we have only been allowed to audition for parts that are trans. And I've been told time and time and time again that I'm not trans enough to even play trans. I'm sorry I curse, but it's such, so I want to be given the same opportunities and audition, and it's starting to happen for me. And I'm very grateful because I worked really hard to get here, but I want to see non-binary and trans-identified people playing all kinds of characters and not just there to talk about their gender or their transition or their surgeries or blah. The other side of that is Wilson brought it up, and I'm so glad because I've been talking about this a lot lately. I get asked all the time, what do you think the future of representation is? I'm so sick of showing up to set and feeling so alone. I would love to go to Crafty and see a trans person at Crafty. I would love for a lighting person to be trans. I know we talk about writers and producers and directors, but those are tough jobs to get. But even if my PA, if I could get a knock on my trailer door, Jamie, they're gonna need you in 5. And if that person was also trans, oh my God, I'm alone so much at work. And it's very isolating. And so I would love to not feel so alone. Yeah. So that it's twofold. It's getting us in the room for all kinds of roles. Don't bring me in just to tell a transition story. Bring me in because I'm good at what I do. Yeah. And then also get me an assistant who's trans so that, we can be trans.
That's great. Well, you guys are all doing your part, just showing up and being in these roles and on these shows. And I see you doing so much work outside of your shows. So thank you for all that. And thank you for being a part of this panel today.
Thank you, Jim.
The Comic-Con fans are going to love this. So.
We love you, Jim.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, all of you. I love all of you so much.
Amazing.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride. And one thing,
Yeah.
My sister will kill me. My sister
Yeah.
is getting married to her girlfriend of 12 years. And can we just say congratulations to her? Her name is
Congratulations.
What's her name?
What's her name? What's her name?
Jean and Anne.
Congratulations.
Happy Pride.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, I've stopped recording. You guys, thanks again. That was one.